People never notice when goodness begins to rot. It doesn't vanish in one violent burst. It seeps away, silently, like water dripping through cracks. Emma Lawson knew how to hide it well. Her neighbors would have told you she was the kind woman on Maple Drive, the one who watered her garden in the mornings and offered polite smiles even when no one smiled back. Her co-workers would have called her dependable. Her mother would have said she was obedient. Everyone believed Emma was good. And for most of her life, she tried to be exactly that. At 32, Emma wore many faces. She was a pediatric nurse who held dying children's hands when parents couldn't bear to. She was a daughter who answered her mother's sharp criticism with silence. She was the friend people texted only when they needed something. And she was the ex-girlfriend who had been told, "You're too good for me," as though kindness were a flaw that made her disposable. But what no one saw was how tired Emma had become. Kindness, she was learning, wasn't endless. It bled you dry. She often thought back to her childhood, to her mother Helen's voice echoing through their cramped house. Good girls don't talk back. Good girls help without asking. Good girls keep quiet. Emma obeyed. She obeyed until obedience became her identity. And now, as an adult, she felt trapped in that same cage of goodness, invisible behind the bars of other people's needs. The first shift came in small moments, so small most people would have shrugged them off. Like the time she stayed late at the hospital to cover another nurse's mistake, only to be scolded by her supervisor for working too slowly. Or when she spent her last paycheck helping a friend cover rent, a friend who stopped answering her messages the next month. Or when Helen, over Thanksgiving dinner, announced to the whole family that Emma still hadn't made anything of herself because she wasn't married yet. No one apologized. No one ever did. Emma carried those memories home into the silence of her small house. The refrigerator's hum was louder than her phone, which rarely rang for her sake. She often sat at her kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing until bitterness rose like bile in her throat. She hated the feeling, but she also couldn't let it go. For once, the bitterness felt like hers, something no one could take. Late at night, she began writing. At first, her leather journal was innocent. Frustrations, reminders of things she couldn't say aloud. But then she started listing names. Names of coworkers who mocked her, neighbors who took her kindness but never returned it. Even strangers whose casual cruelty still burned in her chest. Her pen pressed harder as the list grew longer. And slowly, the writing stopped feeling like confession. It began to feel like a ledger. She noticed other changes too. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw just tired kindness. She saw the faintest hint of something else in her own eyes, something sharper, colder. Once, while brushing her hair, she whispered to her reflection, "Maybe they deserve it." The reflection didn't argue. At work, she caught herself imagining what it would be like if she just stopped caring. If she let a careless parent face the consequences of their neglect instead of stepping in. At home, She thought about what would happen if, just once, she said everything she swallowed down. These thoughts scared her, but they also soothed her. They felt like a release she had been waiting for her entire life. Still, the world went on believing in Emma's goodness. Her mother still called to criticize. Her coworkers still relied on her. Her neighbors still waved at her from across the street, never wondering what it felt like to live inside her silence. But cracks don't heal when ignored. They spread. One evening, as autumn leaves curled on the sidewalk outside, Emma sat at her kitchen table again, candlelight flickering over the journal in front of her. She wrote a single sentence that startled even her. The kind are forgotten. But maybe the forgotten should be feared. When she put the pen down, her hands didn't tremble. And in that stillness, Emma realized something dangerous. She no longer wanted to be good. Emma had always been her mother's daughter. Helen Lawson was the kind of woman who measured worth in obedience. In her world, a good child was quiet, useful, and never questioned authority. As a girl, Emma learned to keep her voice soft, her anger hidden, her needs locked away. She carried that training into adulthood without even realizing it until now. Lately, she found herself remembering childhood moments she had buried. Like the time she tried to tell Helen she was being bullied in middle school. Instead of comfort, she got a lecture. Ignore them. You don't fight back. You rise above. Or the summer she wanted to join theater, but Helen forbade it, insisting Emma's time was better spent helping her cousin study. Every desire Emma had was dismissed in the name of being good. And now, at 32, Emma could feel the weight of all those silences pressing down on her chest. She sat in her car outside her mother's house one Sunday afternoon, debating whether to go inside. Helen had invited her for dinner, or rather, commanded her presence. Emma's hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Through the window, she could see her mother bustling in the kitchen, her sharp profile moving with practiced efficiency. When Emma finally entered, Helen's first words weren't hello, but, "You've gained weight. Emma, you really need to take care of yourself." The old Emma would have smiled weakly, said nothing, swallowed the sting. But this time, something in her faltered. "I'm fine," Emma said flatly. Her voice carried a sharp edge she almost didn't recognize. Helen blinked, startled, before covering it with a tight smile. Dinner went on, filled with criticism disguised as advice. "You work too much. You're too soft with people. No wonder you're still alone." Emma chewed her food silently, her fork digging into the plate hotter than necessary. She imagined slamming it down, imagined her mother's face finally registering fear instead of disappointment. The thought unsettled her, but it also thrilled her. At work, the cracks showed too. One evening, a mother stormed in, furious that Emma couldn't give her child immediate attention. Normally, Emma would apologize, soften her tone, make the woman feel heard. But exhaustion and bitterness won this time. "You're not the only parent here," she snapped. The words came out before she could stop them. The woman froze, shocked. Emma's supervisor stepped in quickly, ushering her away, but the damage was done. Later, she expected a reprimand. Instead, she received an awkward pat on the shoulder from a coworker. Honestly, she deserved it. Good for you. Emma smiled politely, but inside, a different smile stirred. A secret one. For the first time, speaking sharpness felt better than swallowing it. Nights became the most dangerous. Emma returned to her journal, the leather cover worn now from constant use. Her lists grew longer, not just names anymore, details. The way her mother wrinkled her nose when she criticized her. The smug smirk of the friend who never paid her back. The laugh of the doctor who brushed off her suggestions at work. She reread the pages, her heart pounding, her pulse quickening. What once had been private confessions now looked eerily like records. Evidence. Proof that her pain was real and remembered. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to make them regret. To force them to see her, really see her. One night, as rain pounded against her bedroom window, Emma stood before the mirror. She traced the lines of her face, the curve of her jaw, the tiredness in her eyes. She whispered again, "Maybe they deserve it." This time, the reflection didn't just stay silent. It almost seemed to smile back. Her neighbors began to notice something different, though they couldn't put it into words. The woman on Maple Drive who used to wave so warmly now looked distant. Her smile seemed thinner, her eyes colder. When Mrs. Parker across the street asked if she could watch her dog for the weekend, Emma hesitated. She almost said no. But then she smiled, nodded, and agreed. Because good people always said yes. Only this time, when she wrote Mrs. Parker in her journal that night, her hand didn't shake. The moment that truly scared her came a week later. She was driving home late after a long shift when a car cut her off at an intersection. The driver honked, flipping her off as he sped past. Emma's chest burned with sudden rage. For half a second, she thought about pressing the gas, chasing him down, forcing him to feel what she felt. She didn't, of course. She kept driving. But her fingers clutched the wheels so tightly she left marks in the leather. And when she got home, she wrote in her journal, "I could have." That sentence stayed with her long after the ink dried. For the first time in her life, Emma Lawson wasn't sure which was scarier, the idea of losing control or the possibility that she might like it. Emma woke before sunrise, her heart restless, her body unwilling to rest even when her mind begged for silence. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the faint light bleeding through the blinds. The world outside still looked innocent, quiet houses, trimmed lawns, children's bicycles leaning against fences. But inside her, something pulsed with energy. She opened her journal. Its pages had become less a diary and more a ledger. The names lined up like neat soldiers. Some were crossed out, not because Emma forgave them, but because she had found a new satisfaction in simply remembering them. Others she circled, bold and dark, as if daring herself to take the next step. It wasn't enough to just write. Lately, she wanted to see what power felt like, Her first experiment was subtle. At the clinic, a co-worker named Jenna had a habit of stealing credit for Emma's small acts of kindness. If Emma stayed late, Jenna told the supervisor she had finished the paperwork. If Emma soothed a crying patient, Jenna was quick to say, "We handled it together." Normally, Emma would stew silently, letting resentment eat away at her. But this time, she decided to test something. When a mother came in with a sick child, Jenna stepped forward, eager to take the case. But Emma interrupted with a calm, deliberate voice. "Actually, I'll handle this one. Jenna isn't great with children in pain." Jenna froze, embarrassed, her face reddening. The mother looked doubtful, choosing Emma instead. The thrill was immediate. Emma's pulse quickened. She had drawn a line and won. The shame in Jenna's eyes felt like repayment, like justice. Another test came days later. Mrs. Parker, the sweet neighbor who trusted Emma with her dog, returned from her weekend trip. She handed Emma a box of chocolates as thanks. Emma smiled, accepted them, and then, without a second thought, placed the unopened box in the trash that night. It wasn't about hating Mrs. Parker. It was about control. About proving she could reject kindness just as easily as she had once craved it. Watching the chocolates sink into the garbage gave her a strange, cold satisfaction. Her nights grew darker. The whispers in the mirror no longer startled her. They felt like companions. She'd linger in front of the glass, tracing her own lips, wondering how far she could go without anyone noticing. One evening, she left her journal on the table deliberately, pages open to the list. She invited a friend over Laura, one of her few remaining connections. While Lavra was in the kitchen pouring tea, Emma watched her glance at the book, saw her eyes flicker across the page. You write names in here?" Lavra asked nervously. Emma smiled. "Just people who bother me. A way to get it out of my head." Lavra chuckled awkwardly, but her eyes lingered with unease. Later, when she left, Emma noticed she didn't hug her as tightly as usual. That night, Emma wrote, "Fear is powerful. I like it." The small test soon grew bolder. One afternoon, Emma volunteered to organize supplies at the clinic. While no one was looking, she intentionally misplaced a few critical items, bandages, disinfectants. She didn't take them. She simply shuffled them out of reach. The next day, chaos erupted when staff couldn't find what they needed. She stood quietly as others scrambled, her lips twitching. They didn't know it was her, but she did. For the first time, Emma felt what it was like to pull invisible strings. Still, there were moments when the old Emma fought back. A child's laughter would pierce through her bitterness, reminding her of softness, or a patient's thank you would spark guilt. She hated those flickers of light. They made her weakness obvious. Her reflection grew crueler. "You've wasted years being good. Look where it got you alone, overlooked, nothing." Emma pressed her palms against the glass. "Not anymore," she whispered. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday night. Emma stopped at the grocery store after work, exhausted. At the checkout line, an older man accidentally bumped into her cart. He muttered a quick apology, but something inside her snapped. Instead of nodding politely, she leaned in close, her voice cold as ice. "Watch where you're going." The man's face paled. His hands shook as he backed away. Emma paid for her groceries calmly, but inside she burned with exhilaration. It had been such a small thing, a few sharp words. Yet the power it gave her was intoxicating. She carried it with her long after leaving the store. That night she didn't sleep. She stood by the window, staring out into the dark street, her reflection merging with the rain-slicked glass. And when she finally turned away, she didn't recognize the faint smile curving her lips. Emma was no longer just writing names, no longer just imagining. She was learning step by step what it felt like to twist the world around her, and she was starting to enjoy it. Emma's smile had grown sharper these days, though no one seemed to notice. She carried herself differently, her steps more measured, her words more deliberate. She wasn't the tired nurse who swallowed her frustrations anymore. No, now she chose where to cut, when to silence, and who deserved her attention. She had learned something dangerous. People rarely questioned a quiet, polite woman. If she wanted to twist the truth, no one looked for the knife in her hands. The clinic became her playground. She didn't lash out violently. She didn't need to. The thrill came from smaller wounds, invisible ones. One morning, she overheard Jenna complaining about a scheduling mistake. Emma knew exactly why it had happened, because she had switched the chart labels the night before. Nothing major, just enough to throw off the flow. Watching Jenna panic under the supervisor's glare was delicious. When their eyes met across the desk, Jenna's confusion deepened. Emma looked back at her calmly, almost kindly, as if to say, "I'm not the enemy." It was the first time Emma realized how intoxicating it was to make someone doubt themselves. Her experiments stretched outside the clinic. With Laura, the friend who had peeked at her journal, Emma began testing boundaries. She stopped answering her texts immediately, then forgot their lunch plans. When Laura confronted her, Emma tilted her head, her voice laced with false sweetness. "Are you sure I agreed to meet? You might be remembering wrong." Laura blinked, uncertain, embarrassed. Emma held her gaze until the silence cracked her. Watching her confidence shrink was satisfying. It wasn't just about hurting people. It was about reshaping reality. Still, a piece of the old Emma flickered at times. A child in the clinic once grabbed her hand and said softly, "You're nice." For a second, Emma's throat tightened. That word nice felt like a chain. She pulled her hand away faster than she meant to. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Kindness is a trap. Power is freedom." The storm truly broke one Friday evening. A young patient, about 8 years old, came in with a sprained wrist. His father was anxious, hovering too much, snapping at the staff. Emma felt her patience thinning. When the boy whimpered as she adjusted the brace, Emma could have softened her touch. Instead, she tightened it slightly, not enough to cause damage, but enough to make him cry out louder. The father rushed forward. Emma raised her eyebrows coolly. "He's overreacting. Children dramatize pain." The father hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes. Emma knew she had won. Later, alone in the supply room, she leaned against the shelves, trembling, not with guilt, but exhilaration. She had hurt a child, and no one would ever know. It frightened her how easy it was. That fear only fueled her further. At home, her journal filled with more than names. She began noting details, weaknesses, insecurities, the exact pressure points to push. Jenna craves approval, folds under authority. Lavra seeks reassurance, doubts memory. Mr. Collins, supervisor, pride in efficiency, destroy this and watch him crumble. The lists were precise, strategic. They were no longer about revenge. They were about control. But shadows bring risks. One evening, Laura visited unannounced. Emma hadn't hidden the journal in time. Laura's eyes caught the page with her own name. "Emma, what is this?" Her voice trembled, caught between fear and betrayal. Emma closed the book slowly, her expression unreadable. "It's just thoughts, nothing serious." Laura shook her head. "That's not normal. Writing about me like I'm some target." Emma's chest tightened. For a moment, she imagined confessing, asking for help, admitting she was drowning in something darker than herself. But then the mirror's voice whispered from the back of her mind, "Don't let her take your power." Emma's lips curved into a small, cold smile. "Maybe you shouldn't read things that don't belong to you." Laura's face crumpled. She left quickly, muttering something about needing space. Emma didn't stop her. When the door closed, Emma laughed softly. Laura was slipping away, but strangely, Emma didn't feel loss. She felt lighter. The next day, Jenna tripped in the hallway and sprained her ankle. Emma watched her struggle from the end of the corridor. She could have helped. She didn't. Instead, she walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, the sound echoing like a secret only she understood. Emma's darkness had shifted. It wasn't just experiments anymore. It wasn't theory. She had crossed lines and found pleasure in it. But she wanted more. That night, as thunder rolled outside her window, Emma stood before the mirror again. Her reflection stared back with a hunger she could no longer deny. "You've tasted it," the voice whispered. "Now claim it fully." Her fingers tightened around the pen. On the next blank page of her journal, she wrote in large, deliberate letters, "It's time to stop pretending." She underlined it twice, the ink pressing deep into the paper. And when she looked up again, her reflection was smiling. Emma no longer blended into the background. People still thought of her as quiet, polite, dependable, but behind that mask, she was planning. She had learned too much to go back. Manipulation thrilled her. Sabotage amused her. But something inside whispered that she hadn't gone far enough. She wanted proof of her power. Something undeniable. The opportunity came with Mr. Collins. He was her supervisor. A man who boasted about efficiency, loved control, and often reminded staff of their mistakes. Emma had once admired him. Now, she studied him the way a predator studies prey. She began planting seeds weeks in advance. A small chart misplaced here, a vital supply mysteriously absent there. Each time, Collins scolded the wrong person. Each time, Emma stood silently in the corner, her eyes innocent. But mistakes piled up. His reputation trembled. He grew red-faced in meetings, snapping at nurses, fumbling explanations. Emma wrote it all down in her journal, savoring the cracks spreading through his armor. Then came the night it all collapsed. A middle-aged patient was admitted for routine observation after chest pain. Collins had overseen the chart, rushing as always. Emma noticed the error immediately. The medication dose was entered incorrectly too high. She should have corrected it. That's what the old Emma would have done. But the new Emma lingered, her pen hovering above the paper. Her mind whispered, "You don't need to fix it. You just need to watch." So she didn't change it. When the patient's breathing faltered hours later, chaos erupted. Nurses scrambled, alarms wailed, doctors barked orders. In the storm of panic, Emma stood calm, her hand steady as she assisted. Collins, pale and sweating, realized the mistake. His signature was on the chart. His voice cracked as he tried to explain. I must have written no. That can't be." But it was too late. The patient survived after intervention, but barely. And Collins's career didn't. The investigation was swift. His carelessness was unforgivable. Emma testified with perfect composure, her words balanced, her expression sympathetic. She didn't accuse him outright. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. When Collins was escorted out weeks later, his face ashen and broken, Emma watched from the hallway. Their eyes met briefly. He seemed to search her face for answers, maybe even mercy. She only smiled faintly. That night, Emma didn't tremble like before. She didn't laugh nervously in her living room. She sat at her desk, journal open, and wrote one chilling sentence in clean, deliberate strokes. "Today, I destroyed a man, and it felt right." The rush of it was different from small games with coworkers or friends. This wasn't a stumble she nudged into being. This was ruin, permanent. And the most terrifying part was how natural it felt. Still, guilt tried to scratch its way into her chest. She dreamt of the patient's shallow breaths, of Collins's cracked voice. But instead of breaking her, those images hardened her. She told herself what she had done was justice. Collins had lorded his authority for years, dismissing her, silencing her. Now he had paid. But another part of her, the part she wrote about in the margins of her journal, whispered a different truth. It wasn't about justice. It was about power. Her friends noticed subtle changes. Lavra hadn't returned since the confrontation, but mutual acquaintances murmured that Emma seemed colder now, harder to reach. One even asked if she was okay. Emma just smiled. Never better. And in a twisted way, it was true. For the first time in her life, she felt alive. But hunger doesn't rest. After Collins fell, silence felt unbearable. Emma wanted another taste. She found herself staring at people in the clinic, not with compassion, but with calculation. Patients, co-workers, even strangers on the street, each one seemed like a piece on her invisible chessboard. She started sketching scenarios in her journal. What if a dosage was missed? What if an order was delayed? What if she whispered just the right rumor at just the right time? Her handwriting grew darker, deeper, almost violent across the pages. One rainy evening, Emma stood at the window, her reflection framed in glass. The thunder outside shook the panes, but she didn't flinch. Her reflection looked back at her calm, certain, almost proud. "You've crossed the line," the voice in her mind said. "There's no undoing it now." And Emma, with a slow, cold smile, whispered back, "I don't want to undo it." Emma didn't flinch anymore. The quiet hesitation that once lingered in her chest had vanished. After Collins fell, she told herself it was justice. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She liked it. What began as a ripple in her conscience had grown into a current she couldn't resist. Now, when she looked at people, she didn't see individuals with stories, families, or struggles. She saw pieces of fragile glass waiting to be shattered by the right touch. And she was ready to be the hand that shattered them. At the clinic, whispers spread like smoke. Nurses avoided her eyes in hallways, sensing something colder in her presence. Some said Emma had changed after the Collins incident. Others swore she had always been strange, only better at hiding it before. Her smile unnerved them now, too calm, too patient. Lara had long since cut ties, but one afternoon she came back, not to reconcile, but to warn. "You're not yourself anymore," Lara said softly, catching Emma alone in the break room. "It's like you enjoy seeing people hurt." Emma stirred her coffee, her face unreadable. "People always blame others when they can't handle reality." "That's not it," Lara whispered. Her eyes trembled. "You scare me, Emma." For a moment, the words stung. Then, like a blade through silk, Emma's mind twisted them into something else. Fear wasn't a loss. Fear was power. The change seeped into Emma's personal life. Neighbors noticed her late-night walks, sometimes pacing under the street lamp with her journal clutched tight. A mother pulled her child closer when Emma's eyes lingered too long at the playground. Even the local grocery clerk stiffened when Emma stood too close in line, silent, watching. It wasn't just coincidence. Emma was practicing. She wanted to see how much silence could weigh, how long someone could stand discomfort before breaking. She found it thrilling when people looked away first, their nerves frayed, their hands fidgeting. Power no longer lived only in charts and hospital halls. It lived in her very presence. The journal had become darker, too. No more hesitant scribbles, no more shaky confessions. Now it read like a manifesto. Pain is proof of control. Fear bends people faster than kindness ever did. The world has always overlooked me. Now it will answer to me. Her handwriting slanted harder, ink grooves pressed so deep they almost tore the page. Then came the night Emma tested herself in a way she couldn't undo. A storm raged outside as she left the clinic, rain soaking her scrubs. She noticed an elderly patient, frail and slow, struggling to get into a cab. The driver was impatient, shouting at the man to hurry. Emma walked past at first, but something in her froze her steps. She turned back, watching. She could have helped him. She could have steadied his arm, guided him inside, offered the compassion that once defined her. Instead, she waited, silent, still, watching. The man slipped on the wet curb, collapsing against the taxi door. The driver cursed, climbing out to lift him. Emma's heart pounded not with fear, not with concern, but with a dark exhilaration. The old Emma would have rushed forward. The new Emma smiled faintly in the rain. When the man was finally lifted into the cab and driven away, Emma whispered to herself through the storm, "I decide who suffers now." The following week, rumors spread faster. A patient claimed Emma's stare made her feel like prey. A coworker said Emma seemed to know things before they happened, as if she orchestrated chaos. The supervisor who replaced Collins requested a meeting with her, concerned about her detachment. Emma played innocent, her voice soft, her posture polite. But in her mind, she was laughing. Nobody could prove anything. Not yet. What unsettled her most wasn't the suspicion of others. It was how much she craved going further. Little accidents, silent neglects, whispered rumors. They weren't enough anymore. She wanted something bigger, something undeniable. Late one night, sitting at her desk with the storm howling outside, she wrote a chilling line in her journal. "I don't just want to watch the world crack. I want to break it." And as she laid the pen down, her reflection in the window caught her eye. She barely recognized the woman staring back, her face calm, her smile faint, her eyes dark and certain. She had become the very thing she once feared, not a victim of cruelty, but its architect. Emma sat alone in her apartment, the journal open across her knees. Rain lashed against the glass, streaking the window in silver. Her pen moved quickly, her hand steady. Kindness makes you weak. Pity makes you blind. Evil is freedom, and freedom is mine. The words didn't feel borrowed anymore. They didn't feel like experiments. They felt like truth. She leaned back, exhaling. It had been months since Collins's death, and the whispers in the clinic had only grown louder. Nurses avoided her. Patients stiffened when she entered the room. Supervisors called her too detached. But none of that mattered, because Emma had crossed into a place no one could follow. And tonight, she would prove it. She had chosen her target carefully, not a patient, not a stranger, someone who knew her, someone who had once claimed to care. Lavra had been the only one to challenge her, the only one who looked her in the eye and said, "You scare me." The words had echoed in Emma's head ever since. And now she wanted to see that fear again, only this time she wanted to control it. Emma waited until the end of Laura's late shift. She lingered in the parking lot, cloaked in shadows, watching as Laura locked her car, The lot was empty except for them. "Emma?" Laura's voice cracked the night air. She turned, her eyes wide when she saw her. "What are you doing here?" Emma stepped closer, her smile calm, her presence heavy. "I wanted to talk." Lavra hesitated, keys trembling in her hand. "About what?" "About how fear changes people." The silence stretched. Lavra backed against her car, her breathing shallow. "Emma, please," she whispered. "This isn't you. Whatever's happening, whatever you've become, it's not too late. You can stop." Emma tilted her head, her smile soft, almost kind. "Stop?" "Lavra, don't you see? This is the truest I've ever been." Laura's eyes glistened with tears. "You're sick. You need help. No." Emma leaned closer, her whisper sharp as glass. "I need power. And now I have it." For a long moment, the only sound was the storm, the wind carrying the weight of something irreversible. Lavra survived that night. Not because Emma let her go out of mercy, but because Emma realized something more powerful than harm, control, to let Lavra live with that terror, to let her carry the memory of Emma's calm voice in the dark, the promise of something worse that was the greater cruelty. And it thrilled her. After that night, Emma stopped hiding. She didn't need to lash out physically. She had learned something deeper. Fear lingers longer than wounds. A cruel word whispered at the right moment, a mistake allowed to spiral, a silence stretched until someone cracked. Emma wove it all like a web. Her co-workers grew restless, but no one dared confront her again. Patients looked at her as if she were both healer and predator. And in every reflection, in every darkened window, every sterile bathroom mirror, Emma saw not the nurse she once was, but something colder, something untouchable. She was no longer asking whether she was good or evil. She had become the answer. That night, as lightning tore across the sky, Emma wrote her final line in the journal. The monster was never out there. It was always me. And with that, she closed the book, calm, certain. She didn't need redemption. She didn't need forgiveness. She had chosen the darkness, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dark and emotional journeys. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your one click could bring the next chapter to life.